Emotional resilience. Today's topic is kind of important, interesting, and it is based in this whole concept of rational emotive behavioral therapy. So if you have heard about the concept, if you know how rational emotive behavioral therapy works, then you know what I'm walking into, what I'm talking about. If you're new to this concept, we'll explore it together. Okay, so anybody who is new here, let me tell you that this conversation is about how to deal with anxiety by using some specific tools, some specific tools that can allow us to understand our own build up towards anxiety. And I believe that is an essential aspect where you can take charge of the situation and can change things that are in your control. Now these aspects, these areas are important, crucial, and most of the time in no school, in no environment we are taught how to look at it. You know, we understand the whole idea of being successful as how do we earn money, how do we build our image socially, what do we do and what do we say to people who like us, who do not like us. You know, we are always busy in all these concepts. But how about how to take care of our emotional well-being and what exactly one can do? Topics that we require training in, practice in, and definitely require us to look at things and situations in a different manner. Now we are in time right now where we have to understand these aspects. There is no specific choice there. We are not technically equipped to deal with the amount of pressure, the amount of challenges that we have, and that's why the conversation is important. We have been doing these lives. Today is day 19, so we have been continuously talking about different topics, different ways of dealing with this problem and your own emotional balance. So if you haven't explored it yet, it is available on the link aditisurana.com/lockdown21. Every time I think about emotional resilience, I think about a few things, and I must tell you, like when I was 11 or 12, I was gifted this book by somebody in my family, and the book was by a psychiatrist named Anand Nadkarni. It was a book in Marathi. The way we were brought up by so many authors in the house. We had hundreds of books around us when we grew up. And as a teenager, I read a lot of psychology because I wanted to become a psychiatrist, explore that as a profession. So it was because I was so excited, people, started gifting me books which were around my topic. So this book by Dr. Anand Nadkarni was called Swabhav Vibhav, and this was in Marathi. Now, one of the poems that the book had, which stayed with me for the longest time, I'm going to say it as I learnt it in Marathi, and then I will translate it for you. So, every time you look at a situation which feels overwhelming, which feels that where you have very little control to look at things, we get confused. We get confused between what we should do, what we shouldn't be doing. Where do we draw a line about things which are in our control and not in our control? This whole model of locus of control, we have explored it, we have spoken about it, and I actually use it very often while working as a high performance coach, because it's important that you start drawing your own understanding in the situation. If you do not know, if you don't have your internal clarity, then other people can help you. They can tell you, they can show you mirrors, they can give you suggestions, but your internal clarity is essential. It's the most important aspect to look at the situation. Everybody who is on Facebook and YouTube, you can write your messages, you can write all your questions, and at the end of it, I will look at the questions and I will answer. Now, when we understand this whole aspect of emotional resilience, it is about building a skill set so many times that you do not have. When a child falls or fails or makes a mistake, there are some mothers, there are some parents, there are some families who would be extremely irritated about how could you make mistakes, how could you do this, how it is acceptable for you to pick these things and not do it. So there is reprimanding that happens, and the child who has just committed that mistake or has so-called failed to please the parent does not know how to do, how to behave, what exactly to do, how to evaluate the situation. There are families where if you make mistake, you have to pay the price. So there is a so-called reward versus punishment mechanism. I'm not getting into parenting styles, but let's understand, we were brought up with different ideas like that. Some of us were told and were forced to actually deal with the consequences of our decisions, and thereby we had to evaluate our actions. Some of us were treated more emotionally, and thereby when we failed or when we did not take responsibility or when we behaved in an erratic manner, and if we cried, if we became emotional, our family members melted and they just kind of took care of us, and that's how we learned the mechanisms to deal with our emotions. So it is not only family, obviously, it is a friend circle, it is like, the whole environment that we were brought up in. And it takes almost a village to raise a child. Similarly, it takes so many people to raise a child. So every time we were raised by people, we were put into situations which were uncomfortable for us, situations that did not work for us. We constantly sat there and evaluated and learned how to process things which are in our control and out of our control. Does that make sense? So the prayer or a poem which comes from Alcoholic Anonymous group. So this conversation was about how Alcoholic Anonymous people were taught how to process information. Okay, and this is where they use this concept, this is where they talk about it. So it goes like, जे टाळणे अशक्य दे शक्ती ते सहाया, जे शक्य साध्य आहे निर्धार दे कराया, मज काय शक्य आहे अशक्य काय, माझे मला कळाया ते बुद्धी दे वराया. Which means things that I cannot change, give me the strength to accept them. Things that I can change, give me the courage to deal with it, to change them. But but to know for my own self what aspect of my situation I can change and what aspect of my situation I cannot change, give me the wisdom. It's kind of a prayer to start the whole process, but it is rooted in rational emotive behavioral therapy, right? So when we look at the whole concept, when we understand how we look at our own emotions, we can put this simple principle. And for the longest time, every night before going to bed, I kept repeating these lines which I thought were so powerful. And I thought, that's what you wanted. And in the time when I was starting the business and nobody knew about graphology and it was a new concept for people to understand and relate to, I decided to take each situation at a time and take each piece of rejection at a time, and I kept using the same principle, breaking it and by looking at things which I can control and things I cannot control. And that is an essential principle of building emotional resilience. Now the other aspect of it is, you're like, yeah, I understand this, I logically get it, but Aditi, when I get emotional about things just take over. I do not know how to differentiate between the two. When somebody gets to me and says things that they should not, or really hurt me very, very, very badly, I do not know how to look at my own emotions. Now here is a story that I want to tell you. Another favorite example of mine. Now imagine you are in this beautiful gallery, a gallery which is very, very well curated and has amazing paintings from all around the world. And one of the paintings is by Rabindranath Tagore. So you can imagine it is dated, it is carried from by multiple owners, and now it is right here in front of you in this gallery. Now you stand there and you're looking at this painting, and suddenly you find a bee which goes very close to the painting, and because the colors are very bright, she misunderstands the colors in the painting as a flower. So she goes for it, and you're looking at that bee and you're like, oh no bee, stop, it is not a flower, it's a painting, don't go close. But bee being bee, she goes all the way very, very, very close to the painting, and suddenly she realizes there is so much of dust around there. She's like, what's happening here? Oh my god, this is moldy, it is dusty, this is uncomfortable, like what's up with this, whatever I am looking at. Now imagine somebody picks up the bee, takes her at least 10 feet away, gives her a human brain, or I would say artistically driven human brain, and now the bee starts looking at the painting and she is in awe of that piece of art. The same bee who could not handle the dust, the mold, the discomfort of that painting now looks at it from a distance and sees the beauty of it. Now the same principle applicable of so many times when we are too close to our emotions, we get so involved in them that we feel they are uncomfortable, they are moldy, they are dusty, they are unnecessary. But when we can take a step back, look at the same situation, look at the same problem, look at the same emotional upheaval from a distance, so many times we realize the pieces that we got to understand from that journey. Now, I'm not trying to rationalize it, I'm not trying to silver line whatever you're going through or dismiss the pain that you're going through right now. That's not the idea. But the idea here is simple. When we look at whatever is given to us, and if we start differentiating between the two, when we look at, okay, this piece of information is where I can deal with things, I can step away from it and look at things for what they are. So today's topic, I wanted to build towards this whole idea that when things happen to us which are unpleasant, things that we do not want to go through, our instinctive reaction is to resist it. We are like, this should not happen. How can this happen? And no, this is not acceptable. So the first thing that we jump into is, I do not want to go through this. If you know Kung Fu Panda as a movie, the animated movie, there are so many lines which are beautiful and this movie is amazing. But this one line that so many times you meet your destiny on the path that you take to avoid it. Right? This is by Oogway, and when the bird goes as a messenger to tell that I remember that whole scene where they have the threat and they have this prediction that things are going to go wrong, and to avoid the prediction they send a messenger who becomes eventually the reason why the villain escapes the prison. Now, if you look at that line, so many times we meet our destiny on the path we take to avoid it. Think about it, really ponder and pause and look at this. Whatever is happening in front of you right now, emotional, uncomfortable, the pandemic, everything that is happening in front of you. If we stay in resistance of it, all we would do is find reasons why it should not happen, why it should change and alter and become something else that it is not right now. And when that discomfort hits us, our whole idea is to absolutely run away from that situation. But my friend, if you do not do that, for whatever reason, you say, okay, wait a minute, I'm going to alter the situation, I'm going to alter my perspective on it and take this, whatever is in front of me, as the next step that I have to take, I must take, I am supposed to deal with. It's like an exam, right? Like there are people who are lucky enough whose exams are postponed because of the pandemic. But when we were growing up, we didn't have a choice like that. We had to go through the exams. We had to go through the process. We had to deal with whatever you had. And no matter how anxious you were, no matter how uncomfortable you were, no matter how difficult it was, you had to deal with it, right? And the results were not always pleasant. Obviously, we did not score as much as you wanted, you flunked or whatever happened. Similarly, life also has these situations where when we stand there, we're like, oh boss, I got to deal with it. And more I try to escape from it, I add to the whole situation. So, like moments like, imagine you're driving and suddenly someone jumps in front of your car. In order to avoid the accident, you try to take the right turn, you do whatever in the moment and you save the person, but you'll end up banging your car. Now, in this moment, the person comes to you and he's apologetic and he's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done it. So he kind of builds up this whole, he genuinely means it. And now, here you are, no matter what you do about the situation, the damage is done. Now, you can stand there and get absolutely crazy on that, get mad at that person. You can stand there and think, oh my God, why I shouldn't have taken this path. You can stand there and think of all the reasons why you shouldn't have been here, or you can take a moment to realize this is what it is. Now, in Yoga Sutra, they speak about this whole idea and they say, faster you come to terms with what it is, smoother your journey is. So faster you come to terms with it. So for example, you look at a situation and say, okay, oh, this happened, and no matter what that thing is, the very moment you prepare yourself and say, okay, this happened, this has, it shouldn't have happened, I shouldn't have gone through this process, but this happened. Now what? Now what? How do I look at the situation? How do I move forward from here? And I'm not doing this again. Please understand, when you start looking at things for what they are, your emotional reactions become less intense. Your emotional shocks become less intense. Because a part of us is always vigilant about what we can do and what we cannot do. But then there is a part of us which is completely in expectation and entitlement and has some standards that it has to follow. So we like, no, wait, no matter who you are, I cannot be jumping into this situation and agreeing with whatever you're saying because I would like it to be something else. The very moment you say, but what if I look at things for what they are and accept them for what they are, how can I make the most of the situation? Now, people understand, have spoken about this acceptance as a passive emotion, where they believe that, okay, if I accept something, that means this is how it is, it's not going to change, and all I can do is live with it. No, not acceptance as a resignation in the situation, but acceptance in the way I spoke about it. What can I do? So give me the strength to accept things that I cannot change, and give me the courage to change things I can, and give me the wisdom to know the difference between the two. Right? So today's question is where I want you to think of a situation that you're genuinely struggling with at this point in time. You have extreme resistance with. You're like, this cannot happen in my life. This should not happen in my life. This particular person should not leave. This person should not enter. This situation shouldn't go upside down. Now, whatever you're picking up on. Right? So when you think about that situation, you will know that your internal extreme resistance is coming about and looking at things and really want to change it. Right? Now, when I talk about taking a distant approach, the simplest example I can look at is a remote control. Okay? Now, let's go back 10 years and let's think about those old school Bluetooth remote controls. Not now, like how we have all remotes on our phones. I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to the ones which were Bluetooth driven, which means every time you had to look at the television, you had to face the remote to the television and then press the button. The very moment you shifted somewhere else, the remote did not work. You could not change channels because the connection was lost. But when you kept the remote control right facing to the situation, to the television, you could use the buttons and you could use a remote control, right? Now, similarly, when you are taking a distant approach towards the situation, we have to follow this simple principle called detached involvement. You know what people do when they have to take a step back? They say, okay, I'm going to take a step back and I don't care what you're doing, whomever you are, whatever it is happening, I'm just going to focus on my life and your life does not matter. So they do it from absolute disengagement from people they care for because they do not know how to process it. The approach that we are talking about, yes, a distant approach, which means like that honeybee, you take a few steps back and look at the painting, but when you're taking the step back, you are not disengaging from the situation. You are still involved in the situation, but you're taking a few steps back to build a perspective where you can understand things in a better light, understand things as a holistic picture, understand an overview of what is happening. And when we start doing it, when we have that little distant approach, things that we are dealing with suddenly become less powerful. They become less controlling. They become less irritating. And you say, but really, just like thinking about it and taking a few steps back will solve the problem? No, it is not only imagining it, but genuinely doing that. So when you take a step back, you look at things for what they are. But when you are completely involved, like the honeybee who was like in the mold or very, very close to the dusty surface, she couldn't think of anything but the dust. But when she could take some steps back, she could see the whole picture. And that is your game here. That is what we will be doing. Okay, so the question so think about a few things, one or two, where you are absolutely resisting something that is about to happen or that may happen. It could be even being COVID positive. It could also mean, losing the person that you don't want to lose. We have covered so many different topics to prepare in this direction, but imagine you look at that and like, boss, this cannot happen, I cannot let it happen. Now from that space, when you look at that situation, ask yourself, what parts of this situation can I change and what parts I cannot change? Okay, so that's your understanding. That is not the question for the day. The question for the day, which I want you to look at, is where am I resisting this situation? So think of the situation that you're resisting. So ask yourself, where am I resisting the situation and what can I do to drop my resistance? Not change the situation, but drop my resistance. So the very moment you look at things and you say, okay, I have to drop it and I have to like drop my resistance, then you start looking at it, okay, my resistance is my idea. I may have one outcome in mind and I can have 15 outcomes in mind, and I may say, okay, this is what I have to do. But all of them are at the end my ideas. All of them are ways in which I look at the situation and I have learned to look at the situation. None of them are the final concepts. None of them. It's like when you wake up and some people are like, I need coffee first thing in the morning. I have to have coffee, otherwise I cannot become human. So many times this happens, right? Like my coffee, and it has to be at that temperature, and I want medium roasted coffee which is served in a particular way, ground in this manner, and it has to be served at this temperature. Now this is your idea. This is one of your ideas how you can start your days, but this can't be the only idea. So many times when things do not happen our way, we start resisting anything and everything that comes our way because we're like, oh no, I'm not happy with it because it is not what I thought it should be like. And when that happens, when we look at, when that happens, when we look at the situation, I do not know how to alter things. I do not know how to look at things for what they are. I remain stuck. I remain in resistance of whatever is coming my way. Okay, so today's question is about resistance. So think about all these things that you're resisting genuinely from bottom of your heart, from with complete utmost commitment you're resisting it, and ask yourself, what exactly am I resisting here, and what would change if I drop my resistance? Okay, now I'm going to get to graphotherapy practice, the S-stroke practice. All you require is a ballpoint pen and a ruled book. Okay, so stay with me as I do the practice. You start doing the strokes with me. The whole idea is to get into the groove together. So I'll walk you through the process. If you're new and if you do not know how to go about it, the link is aditisurana.com/lockdown21. You can sign up and we will send you all the details required. Once you get the stroke, you can learn it properly and go with the process. And by then, I'm going to teach you and we're going to walk it together. Okay. So the question, what exactly am I resisting here when I talk about these situations? And what would change if I drop my resistance? Not when things change, when I drop my resistance. Okay. I'm going to switch the camera. Give me a moment. Here we go. Now if you're new to this practice, just follow a few instructions that I have here. What you've got to do is you've got to look at 4 things in the stroke formation. The stroke will never start with a tail like this. The stroke will never end with a tail like this. These are two wrong things. Make sure each loop in the stroke is open. The fourth point is, when you are doing the stroke, wherever your hand stops, pick up the pen and start the new stroke again. Okay? It has to be like the smooth movement. And the fourth point is, breathe slightly longer than normal. Whatever is the length of your breath, breathe slightly longer than normal, because it is important that you connect with the formation, which is a physical formation, and while doing that you connect your breath to it. So let's start with this process. Let's go with the stroke. Breathe slightly longer than your normal breath. Breathe longer. That's an essential aspect of this process. Keep your attention on the stroke. Keep your attention on the breath. Let your mind go wherever it has to. You may think about all the moments that you're resisting right now. You may think about some people who are worth resisting because they are incorrect and they are immoral, and all of that must be happening within. Or you must be thinking about all the situations which are incorrect in this moment. No matter what your justification is, one of the thoughts will be to pay attention on the stroke formation and to pay attention on your breath. With that thought, come to the stroke and come to the formation. Breathe slightly longer than normal. Most of the times we have the resistance in the situation because we have decided what they should look like. And anything that doesn't look like our expectation, anything that doesn't look like how we look at things, we naturally, automatically, unknowingly start resisting it. Not because the thing is incorrect, not because the thing is unacceptable, but because it is not your shade of blue.